Hi everyone, Elliot Jacobson here, and a little concerned you're not going to be able to see this. So if somebody can just say, yeah, it's all working, we can see you, everything's cool, I would be greatly appreciative. So I know there's a little bit of a delay usually with these things. So yeah, at some point I got some sort of error message up here that said I wasn't coming through. So somebody in chat just waved to me. So I am going to wait for you to give me the thumbs up. Oh, good. Thank you, Zenape. I so appreciate that. So anyway, now I can go ahead here. I have not done one of these, I think, since January was the last time, and that I did a live show. And I've done a couple shows with a variety of people since then. It's been really hard, and I think everybody out there who's paying attention to what's been going on the planet the last few months knows that. I used to write a lot of blog articles, and I think one of the last ones that I wrote was something like Beyond Grief, there's a sadness deep inside of me. And that's not getting a whole lot better. I am paying very close attention to everything going on the planet, and trying to relay that information through my own weird way with graphs and charts and moments of doom and things like that. But I think that I'm getting enough questions in my Twitter feed about some of the things I've been producing lately that rather than try and write some long Twitter thread nobody will see, or write a blog post that takes a lot of energy and never covers everything, I would just sort of see what other questions people have and answer those as best I can. And if there's a shortage of questions, I'll actually open up some spreadsheets and show you how this is all done. So I'm just going to welcome everybody in chat. Feel free to just post your questions in chat if you have any. Last time I did this, I think I had, I don't know, 40 or 50 people, but I advertised it a couple days in advance. I'm really not expecting a large crowd. You know, it's a Saturday, it's a last minute thing. I was just out walking today, and it just occurred to me that I had to do this. So I sort of rushed home and it's tough going out for walks these days. It's hard looking at the world. It is just hard seeing this planet right now. But I don't want to be a downer for everybody. Hey, so yes, hi going south, who says, hey, this started early. You know, I actually looked at my YouTube views and things like that, and it turns out that Saturdays between like 10 and noon my time is like the premium time for the whole planet to look at these things. Well, okay, Australia and Asia not so much, but Europe, yes, it's your evening, and the East Coast, I guess people, whatever. It's just, so this turns out to be a convenient time according to all of the statistics behind the scenes. So that's kind of why I rushed home to do this. So yes, hello to all of the collapsitarians, collapse-aware people, people who are just paying attention to the planet at a very, very deep level. It is great to know you, great to have you as people in my life, even if you're virtual people. Mostly, I've met a few of you. It's really good. I think we all agree that we don't have many people in our lives that we can just openly share this content with, who are open to it. Even the people who tell me they're open to it and they're interested for an hour and then they're not interested anymore. They hear me talk about it once and then they don't want to talk about it anymore. But they're like, oh yeah, I think about that all the time, and then they don't want to talk about it, right? So you probably have some of those people in your life. I mean, my wife is certainly among those. She's like, okay, there's Elliot again. That's what he does. But anyway, let me not get so distracted by all this stuff. Let's see, going south, your trans collapse. Yeah, Zenape makes the comments that I distinguish between depression and sadness. I would say that's a really important distinction. Depression is actually a clinical condition, and at times in my life, especially going through the death of my parents about 15 years ago, I was clinically depressed, and I actually went on some depressed meds for a while, and I'm not sure if they helped or not. But I'm really aware of what depression looks like, and what I've been experiencing the last few years paying attention to this is anything but depression. It is, depression is where you don't want to go out, you don't want to socialize, you don't want to do things, your creativity drops out, you essentially just want to crawl into a dark space and not come out. Sadness is just an emotional experience, and you can use that experience for whatever motivation you can get from it. I mean, sadness is something that motivates me daily. And, most of what I post and reach out and do in the world is based on that experience. So let's just see what start at the top here. Bernard Marks, I'm not sure if your account is banned from the chat. If you say it is, then I will just have to assume at some previous time I kicked you out for something you said. I have zero tolerance for all sorts of things on Twitter, and that extends to YouTube as well. So, of course, anything denier or climate trolly or anything like that. But also, I have zero tolerance for people who think there are contrails that are geoengineering, that the weather is being geoengineered by some secret group. And I mean, so all sorts of conspiracy theories I have zero tolerance for. I have zero tolerance, of course, for anyone who's just going to go around insulting me for no good reason. So I tend to block a lot of people, and I'm surprised. I think I'm over 27,000 followers on Twitter now. I'm really surprised by that, given how many people I block. I feel like I must have blocked most of them at some point, but I apologize. Let's just see. Poppy Davis asks, I have a question about human extinction. We're going to lose billions of people, but I can't imagine small tribes won't find a way to live in different places, possibly extreme ones. I would. I'm not good at predicting human extinction. I know there are people out there who sort of make that their thing, right? Is predicting human extinction. I don't. So. I don't think humans are more important than any other species on the planet. We are one species that will eventually go extinct. I don't think personally, there's anything near term about that extinction. Unlike a lot of other creatures, whether they're trees or they're coral or they're some local indigenous animal, the ecosystems they can survive in are very limited conditions, right? And so the thing is, things are changing faster than they can sort of either evolve or move, right? So a tree can't very well move if its climate is changing. It's stuck in whatever those new conditions are, whether it's drought or heat or whatever, and it's likely going to have issues, right? So humans are unique in that we have this ability to create ways to control how the environment impacts us, and we also are very mobile. So it would be very difficult for me to believe anything like a total human extinction is anywhere in the near term whatsoever. But I mean, if you look at a population crash, I mean, there's all sorts of reasons that could happen in the near term. And I'm certainly somebody who sides with that. In fact, if you go to my climate casino, you'll see I have an over-under bet, I believe, 8 billion people by the year 2025 or 26. I think it might be 26, which essentially means population stabilizing due to climate issues. But also I'm roughly in the range of 6 billion people by 2050, 2060, which means an actual genuine population crash. If that happens, that's already an amazing thing to say. I mean, people who say 0 people by 2026, what would have to happen is so beyond anything rational that I can't even begin to parse that argument. So yeah, that's when you ask about extinction, those are my thoughts. Let's just see other questions. How many years? So Daniel Vetter asks, how many years do we have left for the current lifestyle? Greetings from Germany. Hi, Daniel Vetter. Glad to have you with us from Germany. It's going to depend on where you live, what your personal resources are financially. I mean, there's some people who clearly already don't have the same lifestyle, whether it's inhabitants of Lytton, Canada, or the Horn of Africa, or Italy that went through 4 months of record heat followed by 4 months of rain in one day. So, I mean, there's all sorts of reasons that local areas collapse. If you're talking about the collapse of global industrial civilization where you live, again, that's in the realm of too big for me to predict or feel like I'm comfortable. So when it comes to those questions of how many years do we have left or things like that, I like to make that very specific, and then I can kind of figure out odds of that one way or another. So, one specific thing would be, do I think there's going to be more acres of forest fire, wildfire this year than last year? And the answer is yes. If you gave me an over-under, I would say yes. And already, Alberta is completely burning up, right? I mean, but I would have said yes just based on all the rain that we have here in my own part of the country, and then all the grasses and low-level vegetation that creates that usually dies in May or June. So yeah, I mean, if you get to very specific things, I feel comfortable with trying to research them and get some sort of feeling for it. But big global questions about current lifestyle, I don't know. I mean, for me personally, my lifestyle is already changing drastically. And I mean, it might just be personal choices. It's not forced on me, but yeah, gosh, that didn't really go very well. I'm so sorry. So Bernard Mark says Fukushima is an extinction level event. I don't think so. It's certainly going to be unpleasant for some species, especially when they start releasing, I don't know if they've started releasing those backup waters that they've been storing, the radiation overflow at Fukushima into the Pacific Ocean. There's going to be some issues for some life in the ocean, and that may eventually cause more cancers in humans. I don't know. Let's see. All right. Poppy says yes. Nuclear annihilation is certainly possible. Sorry for being so behind in the chat, but that's just kind of how this works. Eventually I'll catch up with you. So, this idea that nuclear power is somehow going to be the thing that causes human extinction. I mean, nuclear war could certainly go a long way. And it's certainly possible that we're going to have multiple meltdowns happening with, as civilization kind of slows down, collapses, we lose the expertise, right? We dilute the expertise, or because of some terrorism or war, nuclear power plants are impacted. So I think we're going to start seeing more and more of those sorts of emergencies, but I really don't think it's going to be one of these all at once sort of things that some people do, that, in a single year we'll have 450 nuclear power plants, all melt down simultaneously, and that'll cause the extinction. I think we will see more of these accidents. And look, the plants are safer than ever, but you look at what's happening in Ukraine and you realize that there's other reasons that we could have these radiation leaks. So I'm not going to really go into that any more than I just did. Okay. Mark Crine says, I haven't heard you address any ideas for geoengineering mitigation. What do you think will be the first things we try? Wow. What a great question that is. I had a conversation, I think over Twitter, maybe my one and only conversation with Housefather, where we were talking about that, and the question was, well, if it came down to it, and we had to light off some nuclear bombs, right? Just light them off in a safe space, just to create the conditions of a nuclear winter for a couple of years, so that we could keep the planet cool while the last stages of the Green Revolution happen. Would you do that? And I believe, and he may deny this, but this is my memory. I believe what he said is yes. If it was a question between humans existing and civilization continuing and lighting off a few nukes, he would light off the nukes, right? So when you talk about ideas for geoengineering mitigation, that's at the extreme. I mean, the far, far extreme. I think the problem is that there's so many ideas. We need one good idea and universal sort of support for that idea. The Mir project is certainly one of the best ideas out there. Putting sulfates, artificially spraying iron into the ocean. There's a lot of ideas out there that could have potentially some positive impact on delaying the worst impacts of climate change. But we would need, a large global buy-in to that. And we already sort of had the IPCC and the UN screaming at the top of their lungs. It's hard to know how they could scream any louder that we need to do something right now, right? Some of the comments that were made, at the UN, just you say, what more would you possibly need to motivate the world to start some mega geoengineering project? And the answer, there isn't anything more you can say. So if we can't say anything more, right, what can we do when we need one solution that can be studied, that we can get universal buy-in and then will be implemented, sort of like the polio vaccine, right? We need some global initiative. And that's just not going to happen. It's not going to happen for any number of reasons. So in spite of the fact of there being genuinely good geoengineering ideas, I don't think we are going to try any of them on a global scale that would impact or make a huge difference, short of Housefather's idea of lighting off some nukes, which may happen for one reason or another anyway. All right. So let me just see where we are. Hi, everybody. I'm going to take a minute out from the chat. If you could just pause asking me questions. I just want to show you what I do on Excel, and so that you can kind of understand where all of this stuff is coming from that I've been posting recently. And so let me just sort of take you to one of the sites that I troll. And this is, for example, the sea surface temperatures for the North Atlantic that you can find at Climate Reanalyzer. And I had been looking at these things for a long, long time. So here are the global right here. So global sea surface temperatures. And a lot of people have been copying this and pasting this to Twitter recently. You've probably seen this dozens of times if you've been paying attention. And I looked at all these lines, right, all this stuff, and I said, that's data. How can I get that data? I want that data, right? And so I put out the message on Twitter, can somebody please show me how to get this data? And I got some links that took me directly to that data. Now, what's interesting is that shortly after I got those links, right, Climate Reanalyzer actually posted the links themselves. And it's right under here under Export Chart. If you look under Export Chart, you will see that right at the bottom is download JSON data. And if you click on that, you get the data, right? You get essentially the sea surface temperature every single day starting somewhere in mid-late 1981 to the present. So here is all the data, right? This is every sea surface temperature every single day. And these are not one location, right? This is buoys and satellites and all sorts of ways of measuring it and averaging it. And they go through the explanation of this if you want to read about it on the website. So the question is, okay, now I have this data. What can I do with it? So I managed to download it and just put it straight into a spreadsheet. And so here is that spreadsheet. And, there it is. I've got all of that data in here. And every single day, what I do is I go to that and I take out the latest piece of data and I plug it in. Now, today's latest piece of data, I know this is totally geeking out. I'm sorry, everybody. You're just going to have to deal with it. Today's piece of data happens to be another 20.88 reading for the world. So what I do is I go to this spot right here and I type in 20.88. Yes, I do this manually every single day. This is my about 8 o'clock a.m. ritual. I put this in, and now in this column AT, these are the standard deviations each day. And in this column AU, this is the one in, the chances of this thing happening. And then essentially what I do is I have these other tabs here later on that give all the graphs that I've been plotting, right? So here are the odds that I have been putting up. And you see right here, we're still above 4 standard deviations, right? For example. So let me just show you what happened with the North Atlantic, because that was the one that kind of blew me away. So here it is, the North Atlantic, right? And so once again, I would just plug in the number every day, and I plotted all those things, and I got, let me just see, you're not seeing what I'm talking about last. I need to open it. Sorry guys, you didn't see that. Hang on, I think I can fix this really easy, but it's just going to take me a second. Yeah, I have to go to the other Excel one I have. There it is. All right, so here's the Atlantic, and this is the graph I posted, and this guy right here has gotten, 2,000 likes and whatever. It's just been shared a bunch of times. And essentially that's all I did here was to put in the sea surface data and figure out how far away this number right here is each day from the average for the same day. Well, up at the top, you see, here is the average, right? I just take the average along that whole row of data. That is the average for that day of the year. I have 365 days in the year, so that's the average from 1982 to 2023 of all those days. I'm sorry I'm geeking out. You're probably totally bored by now. Any rate, I'm looking at the difference between these two numbers, right? Today's temperature is 21.49 for the Atlantic. The average for 1982 to 2023 is 20.62 degrees. That is 3.23 standard deviations above expectation. And I put that all together and I graph it. I just graph all that data. So this is remarkable. This is crazy. That is absolutely bonkers that we have this sort of record deviation going on today from the averages, from anything that's ever happened before. So, this is why I wanted to come online today, was to try and explain any questions people had about any of these graphs, along with anything else you want to ask, of course. So I'm just going to go back to me because I think I just lost half my audience there. So let's just see where we are. Hi, welcome back. I'm back. And hopefully that wasn't too long for you, but you will, yeah, any rate. Let's just see what else is happening. Was that okay? You let me know that was okay in the chat right there. So let's go back, and if I scroll down and then see a question about this stuff, you'll know what they're asking about. Let's see. Daniel Vetter is asking, oh, you already had that one. So ZenApe. Am I anticipating or factoring in decreased fertility from environmental pollutants into my population predictions? Yes, I would say I am. I've absolutely been paying attention to that. I mean, there are some countries that are actually in net negative population growth right now. And, there's not only that, there is the, there's the whole sort of movement to have none or fewer children by people who are collapse aware, or at least have some anxiety, right? There is the decrease in the sperm that is, I guess it's actually been already studied. So, there's less fertility in humans now than there used to be. So, yeah, I mean, when I say 6 billion, I mean, that's a crazy low number, right? So, yeah, there's all sorts of reasons that can happen. Gosh, I'm, Guiart 47 says that you've been thinking it's 2 years away for 10 years now. Hopefully this trend continues for a while. It's interesting you say that. Who is his name? Rupert? Michael Rupert, is that the guy who in 2008 or 9, he was a doomer who was sure that those were the years when it was going to happen, and he actually kind of thought that the financial meltdown was the start of the collapse of global industrial civilization. You have Sam Mitchell, who I believe started in roughly 2013, 2014, doing his videos. You have, of course, GM, who predicted pretty much a blue ocean event by 2016. That's never happened. It's really easy to think that we have 2 years left. It's very convenient. It's reassuring. It's much more difficult to keep going, right? It's much more difficult to acknowledge that this is going to continue and that it's going to be slow and painful, and we're going to see it and witness every little bit of it along the way. And I mean, that's part of the grief, right? That's part of the sadness, is seeing just how complicated everything is and watching it fall apart one piece at a time. I mean, when Trump was president, that was kind of how I felt about American civilization. I would see him do something very small, right? Some small dismantling of democracy. And every single one of those hurt, right? Every single one, whether it was saying that there were good people on both sides when referring to a white nationalist confrontation, or what he did with the Supreme Court justices. Every single little thing hurt, right? Every one of those hurt me as an American. And it's the same thing with the collapse of nature and the collapse of ecosystems and natural systems. Every single one hurts. And it's such a complicated web that you can't look away from it. You can look away from politics, and I consciously look away from politics, but you can't look away from the collapse of everything, right? From the collapse of nature, from the collapse of the planet. You can't look away once you see it. So at any rate, it's going to be complicated. Bernard, so let me just say something. You mentioned GM in your comment. I am going to hide that message. And I'm just going to ask people in general not to mention GM by name in the chat. He is a very controversial person for very many reasons, but he and I have a personal history that he is just absolutely persona non grata. Everything about who he is, what he says. I'm not saying what he's saying, everything he says is wrong. In fact, a lot of my early education in the Doomer universe came from him, and I understood a lot of concepts because of him. But I simply have a no GM policy, and I also have that in my Twitter account. I don't know if any of you have noticed. You never, or unless I miss it, you don't see that name mentioned in my Twitter because I'm always either hiding or deleting those comments. So I'm just going to leave that alone. So all the forests in Northwest Montana are dying at an exponential rate. Andre, couple things about that. I'm so sorry you live in Montana right now. And is that the state, or was it Wyoming, with the governor who just said crazy, or you did crazy things? Montana is a beautiful, beautiful state. And, you know, I don't know that what you're saying directly or understand why. Yeah, let me skip it. So I have this whole pet peeve about the word exponential. You know, it's easy to say the word exponential and think 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, and so on. But exponential anything, just so you know, you guys out there know, when people say exponential, it's sort of a rhetorical device, right? It's like, oh, it's getting faster and faster, right? It's getting more and more faster and faster. And that's true. It is getting more and more faster and faster. But exponential's beyond that, right? Exponential essentially means that it never stops getting more and more faster and faster, that will continue, right? And not only that, if you know any calculus, you would know that it means that all of the derivatives are positive. And essentially any natural phenomena, anything natural that has a boundary to it or has any limiting condition on it whatsoever, and forests certainly have boundaries, right? And limiting conditions would be like a rainstorm or firefighting or whatever. Anytime you have a boundary and limiting conditions, it by definition can't be exponential. So I appreciate the rhetorical use of the word, and I apologize for it just is one of those things, you know, people, there's like this meme that goes around that says, you know, humanity's greatest failure is not understanding the exponential function. And the thing is, most people who post that don't understand the exponential function. It's sort of like this, I know something, you know, that's happening that, you know, you don't understand, but nothing is exponential for very long. It might be exponential for a week or two, but actual exponential growth exceeds everything so fast, right? That it simply, it can't go on. I'm going to stop. I've spoken too long on that. They tell me that you think too much, Rachel. Oh, they tell you that, Rachel. Oh, is that what I'm so sorry. You know what? I'm going to go to the very bottom and scroll up for a little. And let's see what's going on here. So we have Going South saying maybe work with climate reanalyzer to include Iceland, North Sea, etc., as key parts of the North Atlantic. Yeah, you know, they just make a little rectangle. And so if you fit into that rectangle, you're in the North Atlantic. It's not really a geographically sensible designation. So let's just see what else we have here. All right. Let's see. I'm just going to read through some of these things. Yeah. Let's not talk about 2016. And you know, one of the things about quoting other people's research, right, is that you can get lost in that. You can, and you know, you talk about cherry picking, and the climate trolls are often, you know, the masters of accusing scientists of being cherry picking. You know, why did you start in 1982? The climate's been around for billions of years. Well, I started in 1982 because that's when the data started. And by the way, you know, we've added whatever 80 parts per million CO2 since then, right? So, you know, when you talk about cherry picking, it's really easy to target climate scientists as cherry pickers. But the same goes for quoting research papers, right? You can cherry pick single statements from a variety of research papers and create all sorts of scenarios and then say, yes, but I found that in a research paper. Well, yeah, but rather than relying on a single paper, what's really cool is to do these sort of meta studies, the ones that look at 2,000 different research papers and try and come to a sort of a consensus opinion. And that's what the IPCC does, right? They take this whole huge body of research and try and get a consensus. Now, we all know that that the IPCC is conservative, right? They're never going to say how bad things really are. They're always sort of on the, it's not as bad as the doomers are saying kind of perspective. But at least you have some consensus there. When I look at the charts, the presentations of data in the IPCC, I feel comfortable with that, right? So, for example, the IPCC, they used to have what they called the 1750 baseline, right? And so, one of the things you could say is, well, they've cherry-picked their baseline to start at 1850 to 1900. Well, yeah, the IPCC originally was they said the 30-year period centered at 1750. And that was earlier IPCC reports. Well, they realized that really they couldn't say very accurate statements about the global climate until they had robust global measurements, right? Which really, if you start between 1850 and 1900, then you can be very confident, right? So the question is, well, what have we done since 1850 to 1900? And the answer is about 1.2 C, right? As of 2016, it was 1.21. And then what you have to ask the question, well, what happened between 1750 and 1850 to 1900? And how can we account for what happened during that period? Well, the IPCC very clearly states that, right? And they say, and this is not just one paper and cherry picking what one person said. This is a consensus estimate of anywhere from minus 0.1 C to plus 0.3 C. That's the error bar. And if you choose the high point of that error bar, plus 0.3 C, as how much, the things increase from 1750 to the 1850-1900 baseline, you get at most 1.5. So claiming anything like we're 2 or higher from 1750 is just absolute sheer nonsense. It goes against the best science, the people who have really looked at this stuff and put out a statement, of what is really definitive and clear. And yes, you can cherry pick if you want, this or that. But I'm going with the IPCC. I absolutely support the 1850 to 1900 baseline. I absolutely support the research they did to try and account for that shift in baselines so that you can get an overall warming trend. And I mean, that is one thing. The other is the blue ocean event, right? So when we talk about the blue ocean event, we're talking about, a period sometime in the future when sea ice drops below 1 million square kilometers in the Arctic. And once we get below some threshold, what's going to happen is that because of the loss of reflectivity of the ice, more solar radiation will go into the water, it'll warm it up, and then after about a decade of that, we'll be year-round without any ice in the Arctic. You can say that, right? It's easy enough to say that. But there's been some recent research that kind of refutes that happening as quickly as we thought. And most recently, Jim Massa made the point that there is now a big, huge fog problem in the Arctic, right? A big fog problem. And what creates the fog, right? Well, you have water and what generally creates fog? I'm thinking, I'm brain dead right now. Cold water and hot air above. And so this is what's happening in the Arctic, right? As more sea ice melts, we're getting more and more fog. Now, the question is, which has higher albedo, higher reflectivity, fog or sea ice? Well, I don't know the answer to that, but they're pretty similar, apparently, according to Jim Massa. And so, we're not going from sea ice to sunny, hot days, right? We're going from sea ice to fog. So to think that that fog is going to allow somehow for the water to become superheated in no time, it's not really understanding the physical processes going on in the Arctic. Also, the more open water you have, this is another one of these feedback loops that's happened recently. It turns out that open water, so if you have thick ice, right, then all right, you have nice thick ice, you'll get snow on top of it, right? But if you have open ocean, you can get very quickly a thin layer of ice. And so one of the things that's happening is these thin layers of ice are happening over the Arctic, and then storms are blowing these thin sheets of ice into thicker, accumulations of ice. And so we're actually getting this feedback that the more open ocean, the more we get thin ice, the more we get weather events creating, accumulations of thicker ice from that. And so, there's sort of these two things working against this blue ocean thing happening and destroying all life on Earth by 2016. So, all right, let's see what else we have to say here. I am so sorry for going into these rants. Maybe you like rants, I don't know. Oh, Rachel Nelson is saying don't apologize, but that was a long time ago. I am so ranty today. You guys don't even want to talk about these things I've been doing on Twitter. Montero Lobato says, you talk about a lot about things you say, let's not talk about this. I'm just saying, I love that. Yeah, I do. I do talk a lot about things. I guess I have a lot of, being a doomer, Sam Mitchell has this great statement, if you get a dozen doomers together in a room, they'll give you 13 different definitions of what a doomer is. So I really see that strongly. And, I try and be a science-based doomer, but I also am constantly trying to do my own sort of original research, and it's not deep, right? Just give me some data and let me put something out based on that data that people haven't done before. And, to me, that's kind of what it means to be involved with this stuff. It doesn't mean constantly reading what other people have done or trying to piece together, other people's thoughts about things into your view. It means going out as a scientist. It means you or me, I have some tools. I don't have the same tools as a PhD climate scientist. I taught courses in partial differential equations to would-be meteorologists, right? That was back when I was a math professor. I understand a lot of the mathematics of this stuff, but I'm not out in the trenches, publishing the way Michael Mann is, for example. So I take a step back from, putting myself at any sort of level like that, but it doesn't mean that I can't show original work and produce that. And, just for example, here is something that I have not yet posted on Twitter, and I was thinking about doing this. Let me see, I will be here in just a second. Here it is. All right, so this is something that I created just for, let's see if I can make this thing a little bit larger for you. Can you see that? Oops, now we're off screen. Let's see. All right, so I haven't posted this, but this is one of these ideas that I had that I haven't seen anybody else do. The warming stripes is a very simplistic view of history. Essentially, we take every single year and say, here was the temperature this year, here's the temperature this year. And then we simply do a color coding, a spectrum of these things to, give some sort of visual impression of how temperatures have changed over time. What I have here is every single day has a color associated with it. And what I did was to take the 1982 to 2011 average temperature for every day of the year. That's 365 days, right? So I took the average temperature for that day, for May 20th, when I average those values, 82 to 2011. Why did I choose 1982 to 2011? Because that's the baseline the Climate Reanalyzer uses. They use that baseline, so I'm using that baseline, right? It's their data. I want to use their data the way they use it. And what I did is, so I take that day, May 20th, and then I simply look at every single day. So here is May 20th, right? I don't know if you can see this right here. Here is May 20th. And so this entire row is going to be all May 20ths. And what I do is I simply ask, what is the difference May 20th, 1982 from that baseline average? And what's the difference May 20th, 1983 from that baseline average? And so every single one of those 42 years of data is going to have a difference. And so I just color coded appropriately. And so this is what I think warming stripes should be, right? Warming stripes should be every single day's difference from the averages. So, I mean, this to me lets you see fascinating patterns. I don't know. I would just like it if people who are out there as scientists and as doomers, produced a little bit of original work. I would like that. And simply collating other people's work. I mean, and then saying because you're a scientist, right? At any rate, I gotta just move on. All right, let's see what else is going. Oh, Elliot, stop it. Yeah, today will be the day where everybody says, yeah, I kept on saying he shouldn't talk about it, but he did anyway. So, when the cool air mixes with the warm, moist air over the water, the moist air cools until the humidity reaches 100% and fog forms. Thank you, innocent bystander. I should have just said that myself. Bernard Marx says, I'm of the opinion that all these things happening are faster than expected and sooner rather than later. And I would say I agree with that for the most part. I would say that some things are happening slower than expected. For example, the ENSO cycles have slowed down. Now, if you read some research, El Nino used to be happening much more frequently than it is now. All right. Let's see. Going South says fog generally disappears after the sun for 1 to 3 hours. That is usually the case where I live, that we'll have morning fog and afternoon sun. But in the Arctic, right, you have 24-hour sun. So you really don't have that. I mean, it doesn't make sense for it to disappear 1 to 3 hours after the sun when the sun is always up. So yeah, pretty much you just have nonstop fog. So that is not going to, I don't know why, but there's a paper, look it up, look fog Arctic, do a Google search, you'll find that article. Bernard Marx asks, what made me a doomer, what radicalized me? I like that, radical. I pictured myself as a radical in the 1970s. I did go to Earth Day. My first Earth Day was 1977. I was age 19. I went to UC Davis for Earth Day, and Timothy Leary was speaking there. I believe I heard him speak, and he was talking about humans in outer space. I mean, there's some guy today who likes to talk about that too. But he was all about colonizing space at that time. I grew up in with the environmental movement because I'm on the West Coast. Santa Barbara, where I currently live, is actually the home of Earth Day because of the oil spill that happened in, I think it was 1970. At any rate, the very first Earth Day, it sort of started right here in Ground Zero. We grew up, we boomers, right? We grew up with rivers on fire, with acid rain, with ozone and smog, with opposing nuclear power, with the threat of nuclear warfare. 1963, I was certainly alive when the Cuban Missile Crisis happened. Practicing air raid drills. for nuclear bombs, duck and cover drills. So it was hard not to believe we weren't sort of in the last days of humanity. And because of that, I sort of have always had this sense of doom. My generation accomplished a lot of things, from the Clean Air Act, Clean Water Act, Endangered Species Act, getting rid of lead in gasoline and lead in a lot of things, helping clean up the ozone, and on, right? So, there's an argument when people say, okay, boomer, there's an argument to be made, and I think it's a good one, that but for the actions of people, my generation, we wouldn't have a habitable planet today for younger people to be saying, okay, boomer, right? So it's called the anthropocentric, is that it, principle, that but for your existing, you wouldn't be able to ask the question, why do I exist? And that same idea, right, is kind of why I became a doomer, because I lived through all of these things. And so I've been aware of collapse my whole life, from a very, very young age, from 5 years old when JFK was assassinated, right? Just been aware of the fragility of the planet. I had a life. I had kids, I had a job, I had a career. And when I retired, I decided to start volunteering. And my first volunteer work was at the Santa Barbara Zoo as a docent for our elephants. And once you start thinking about elephants, I was also a docent for other animals. In fact, at one point, I was the only person who was sort of allowed to be a docent for any animal. So I was a koala docent and an anteater docent. And I would go around and answer questions for a lot of different animals. I became very aware, and I studied the IUCN Red Book of endangered species, and became familiar with what was going on ecologically all over the planet. And that all began in roughly 2016, 2017. So I think that was the start of my sort of deep dive into it in my second career as a doomer. I think that may or may not answer your question, Bernard Marx. Wow. I really appreciate all your questions. I'm going to take 1 minute, all right? So hang on just 1 minute. Well, that wasn't even a minute, was it? No, it wasn't. No, definitely not a bathroom break. Thank you all for being here. I'm going to see what are the questions I might have missed up above. Yeah, I don't know. I think that this is a hard time to be alive. I read every day a lot. I find a hard time reading books on these things, and there are so many good books written, but they always feel out of date, right? Because what's happening right now is, the books might have been published 3 months ago, and we're already onto something new and remarkably, dramatic happening on the planet. So we're entering an El Nino year, and just to sort of show you what that means, I want to take you to one of my favorite websites, if I can. I'm now realizing I've pretty much screwed up my everything here by closing things out that I should not have closed out. Hang on just a second, all right? Just a second. So one of the things that I do pretty much every single week is look over this document. And this is available from at NOAA. And if you just sort of Google this, you'll find it. And so we see that this is updated pretty much once a week. So last Monday, it'll be updated day after tomorrow. And so if you scroll down here, you get sort of all of the latest data. And, this is the latest El Nino predictions. And we see those predictions coming in pretty powerfully in favor of El Nino happening by May, June, July. And that is certainly sooner than expected. I mean, people just a few months ago were talking about it maybe later in this year. This is happening very fast. And El Nino, in case you don't know, there's sort of a direction that the wind goes in the tropics, which is from east to west off the coast of the United States, of Central America. And what that has the ability to do is to cool the surface waters and send all the heat westward towards Indonesia. And every so often that process sort of reverses, and the heat that was buried, the winds die down, it starts coming back to the surface. And if the winds actually reverse, then we get some of that hot water that is accumulated off of Indonesia and that part of the world sort of blown back in our direction. And that is, you require both of those conditions. You require both the temperature of the water and the change in wind direction to declare an El Nino. So you cannot simply say we have an El Nino because now the waters are over 0.5 C above average for 3 consecutive months. You also need the wind. So when they make these predictions, we may have ocean temperatures that already are in the El Nino territories, but they won't declare it till we get the winds. And when this year, right, we have the hottest ocean temperatures ever. We have the hottest temperatures on the whole planet. We have the hottest temperatures, especially in the North Atlantic. And hot temperatures are usually associated with El Nino. Well, the previous high was in early 2016. And if you look at that El Nino, the 2016 El Nino, right? So here we are, 2016. We see that it ended in March, April, May. That was the end of the El Nino. So the El Nino had been going really blazing hot in late 2015. And because, you had all of that hot water being pumped up, that's what created this spike in global temperature so that we got this 1.21 record global temperature since the 1850 to 1900 baseline. Well, we have right now ocean temperatures hotter than after that record El Nino. And we have had 3 years of La Nina. So what's coming in the next few months, maybe up through the end of 2024, is anyone's guess. But the latest results I just saw is that if you look at climate forecasts for the yearly average temperature, 1.2 was 2016. If you look at the forecast for what it's going to be for 2023, 1.5 is now in the error bar for 2023 for the first time. In other words, there is an actual chance that we will see 1.5 this year. Now that's an extreme case, But for next year, I just posted a climate casino, wager where I am giving 3-to-1 odds against. In other words, if you think we're going to get to 1.5 C in 2024 and you bet a fake dollar, I'm only going to give you 33 cents if you win. Because I think the case is that strong for 1.5 in 2024. Why? Again, we already have record, not small record, huge record global sea surface temperatures by a long ways hotter than anything else, except for 2016. I mean, 4+ standard deviations, right, above the average. It's crazy what's going on globally. And that's after 3 years of cold, cool La Nina weather. So we are going to see a different world by the end of 2024. That is the absolute truth. A different world by the end of 2024. And yeah, so yeah, crazy. I don't know. It seems like I should add more of a point to that. Let's see. Rachel Nelson makes the nice quote. Deniers are happening faster than expected. There are so many deniers on Twitter. It's professional. It is not, I understand that there are organized groups on Reddit, for example, who target certain climate people. They say, here, go after these people. And I would believe that's the case with me if one given day I had, say, 500 or 1,000 trolls in a thread of mine. But what typically happens is that I have just a trickle of trolls every day. And when I look at these people, they've got 5 followers or 15 followers or 11 followers, but they've been on Twitter since 2014. Their account's that old. So what that means is that there are organizations that have sort of created these fake accounts, and they've just sort of held them there in reserve for when they would be needed at a later date. And I don't know how many thousands or millions of these rogue accounts there are, but it's the same people over and over simply grabbing another one of these fake accounts and posting the same nonsense that I'm meeting. So it's a small, organized group of professional trolls, paid professional trolls who go after me. And once in a while, it's some person who just found me somehow and actually wants to make a point. But it's almost usually, you can pick out the top 20 things they're going to say, and it's always going to be one of those 20. So yeah, I am. Any rate, let's see. Zenape says accelerated growth, maybe. I thank you, Zenape. That is much more accurate. Okay, physics, right? There's motion. The first derivative tells you the velocity. The second derivative tells you the acceleration. The third derivative, what do they call that? The jerk, right? So, yes, things are accelerating. I absolutely agree. Monteiro Lobato said, did I say 3-to-1 or 1-to-3? 3-to-1 against. So if you bet against there being 1.5 C in 2024, and we really don't get 1.5 C in 2024, I will pay you 3 fake dollars for every fake dollar you bet. So 3-to-1 against. So you get 3-to-1 odds if you wager against, is what I'm saying there. Trickle of Trolls would be a good band name. Yes, Zenape. By the way, I just got this book. I bought it used for $3. So this is typical of me. I understand that this is a really good book. I understand what termination shock is, by the way, so I don't need to read the book to learn the physics of what he's talking about here. We are experiencing termination shock right now, just so you know. Yeah, we are. I should talk about that a little bit, but I can't read this stuff. I read 10 pages and there's characters and I have to remember characters and there's a location and I have to remember a location and they have personalities. I have to try and remember their personalities. I have a condition called aphantasia. And if you don't know what aphantasia is, let me just describe that to you. It is an actual medical condition. And what it is the inability to create a mental image. It's the inability to create a scene or picture in my mind and see an image. And there's if you go online and Google aphantasia, you'll see there are tests for this. And one of the tests is picture an apple, right? So right now, everybody, try and picture an apple, right? What do you see when I tell you to picture an apple? Shut your eyes and picture an apple. Some of you might see a full apple colored with the light bouncing off of it. Some of you might just see sort of the outline shape of an apple, but you see color there. Some of you might just have sort of a glimpse of an apple with, some weird definition. True aphantasia, nothing, right? I can't picture an apple. I can't, nothing, absolute zero. So I cannot read novels. I cannot read novels because I cannot picture what these people look like. I can't picture what the scene is. I can't picture how, I can't remember anything about these characters after, it's such a struggle for me. And I've had this my whole life. Might have something to do with me being a mathematician, right? Where I can actually derive things from first principles. But I try and read novels and I just give up over and over. Somebody is accusing somebody of being a troll here. I hope that was a joke. Here. Let's see. I was going to talk about something else and then I forgot what I was going to say. Elliot, you're sounding a bit paranoid. Montero, if you were me, right, and you posted something that 2,000 likes, maybe you do have that kind of Twitter following, I don't know. But along with those 2,000 likes, you had 100 people saying that I was a liar or that, posting some sort of meme about all the times climate scientists have been wrong or, whatever else it would be. And, I don't want any of that stuff up there. And you had an obsessive personality like I do, then you too would spend, 5, 10, 15 minutes at a shot. Hide, block, right? And so much of my life is spent doing that. And again, if it was a sudden flood, it would be one thing. But it's this sort of constant rate that makes me know what this is. And there actually are paid, you can read about this. Go out and read about the paid trolls on Twitter. It is a real thing. Bernard Marx, I would tell you to get off I'm not going to tell you to get off it. But Fukushima is one nuclear accident. Ukraine in Kiev, that's not Kiev, was the one that melted down there. Chernobyl is another one. 3 Mile Island is another one. I would say of those, what happened at Chernobyl is much worse than Fukushima. And the sarcophagus that's essentially protecting that whole part of the European continent is now collapsing. They're building one off-site, 100 meters away that they're going to have to slowly sort of move over because it's too radioactive to build directly on site. It's an ongoing catastrophe that will be with the planet for 10,000 years. But none of those things are going to be the thing that takes down global industrial civilization. What will take us down are collapses of ecosystems that are where we grow our food, right? Hunger is a huge driver. Possibly conflict will be in there. We're going to have more and more places that are just inhabitable. So we're going to have migrations happening, and that's going to create border conflicts. The collapse of civilization is not going to be as simple as just Fukushima, but I would look first at just the collapse of food supplies. Oh, look, Poppy Davis says, unfortunately, you imagine the Apple icon. Yeah, I can't do that. Tennessee Jed also says, you see a phone going south, says you see the Beatles record label album. I like that. Yeah, aphantasia. Yeah, it's a weird, weird world I live in. But it is every bit of the reason why I am a scientist. William Dillon says how mechanical trade people whose occupation relies on engineering and science won't believe in the science behind climate warming is befuddling to me. I don't know that many, William. I suppose they're out there. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's just some people who do it because they can. I don't know. People like to be trolls to get attention. Yeah, that's great. William Dillon says, what I do with deniers is have them pull up the Scripps Institute Keeling curve and scroll to 8,000 years CO2 graph. Yeah, that you can certainly do that. There's actually an animation that will play that shows you the last 800,000 years of CO2. The thing is that what they will reply to that is that the data has been faked. You know, how many trolls and deniers have told me that, how much did you get paid for faking this data? Or, you're just doing this for the grants, or, they don't even bother to check out that I've been retired for 6 or 7 years now. Let's see. Yeah. Hi, David Ulrich. I don't recall you being here before. Termination shock. Thank you. Thank you for bringing back that comment to me. And right below that, Tennessee Jed, thank you for that emoji. That is exactly how I feel. I feel that way. All right. So what happened in 2020 was this international maritime organization agreed that they were going to clean up their shipping fuels. And that involved reducing the sulfur content by about 80%. And the clean sulfur fuels, I think it's called IMO 2020 or something like that. When that went into effect, these regions of where shipping was most pronounced, that went from sort of the southeast United States to Europe and the southwest United States over to Asia, right? Those main shipping channels were the ones that sort of got cleaned up the fastest, right? The sulfur dioxide that was emitted by these shipping fuels would persist in the atmosphere sort of directly above these shipping routes. That's where it'd be in the highest concentrations. And so we would have this aerosol masking effect, really strongly protecting those regions from direct solar radiation. And what happened when these fuels went away in 2020 is that almost exactly corresponds to the time when the temperatures of these oceans started warming up. And I just want to show you that I want to show you a graph of that so you can really see what I'm talking about here, because this is really remarkable. And I have to figure out how to make this work again, because every time here it is. Look at this. All right, so this is a plot I've made for the North Atlantic. that what I did was essentially, I took again the average temperature, right, for this entire period from 1982 to 2023. I took the average temperature for that entire period. And then if a day was above that average, whatever amount it was above the average, I added that amount. And if the day was below that average, whatever amount it was below the average, I subtracted, that amount. And so I took the sort of cumulative amount that a year was above average or a year was below average. So you add up every single day of the year, how much is every single day above or below the average for that day. And you get this graph that I have right here. And it is not hard at all to see. Again, this is for the North Atlantic, right? This is for this primary shipping routes that go from, Toronto over to Europe, that go from New York to Europe, that go from Florida, and all the East Coast ports over to Europe, right? All of that sulfur dioxide is not there anymore. So we're not talking about La Nina or El Nino here. We're simply talking about the aerosol masking effect over the Atlantic Ocean. And when you look at this, the 2020 to 2023 so clearly stands out. You can just see this right here, and it's just brutal, right? This is brutal what's going on right here. So this is termination shock, right? Termination shock is when society decides to clean up its fuels, and we have this secondary unintended consequence that by cleaning up fuels, we actually heat the planet faster, right? If we were to stop all fossil fuels on the planet, which by the way, we're not going to, then we would have, genuine global termination shock. But what we have is sort of oceanic termination shock. And that is a large reason, when you talk about why are the ocean temperatures rising so fast right now? That's it. That is it right there, right? So what has actually happened, though, is I believe in the Mediterranean, they've actually imposed even stronger shipping fuel requirements so that they have to be even cleaner. So instead of this 80% reduction, right, we're going to like 95% reduction in sulfur dioxide. And that's going to be effective this year or next year. I don't know when it is, but it's very soon. So when you talk about Spain and Portugal and Greece and Italy and all the North African countries that border the Mediterranean, what's going to go on there with this termination shock in the next couple of years, is anyone's guess. So this is really scary to me. And Leon Simmons, who's somebody I follow on Twitter, and if you don't, you absolutely should. He's the one who asked me to do this computation and share this. It just blows me away. I mean, what's happening in the Atlantic with termination shock right now just absolutely blows me away. So, any rate, I wanted to talk about termination shock just a little bit. I'm going to see Tennessee Jed. Bernard Marks, thank you for saying that to Tennessee Jed. Thank you. Yes, thank you. You are my honorary moderator, my GM moderator. Let's see. Jem Bendel. Jem, look, I really like Jem Bendel. I really, really like Rupert Reed. And I just recently, just a couple weeks ago, let me see, I have to have it here somewhere. I bought this book. So you should buy this book. Did I read the book? I mean, some of it. I'm not a great reader, like I said. It's hard for me to read. But there's just some people out there that I really love in this business. And these two people, Jem Bendel, Rupert Reed, and there's a couple others like them, but they are true deep thinking academics who are trying to do good, solid sort of sociological work surrounding extinction and climate change. And yeah, I don't know. I guess if I was going to recommend you buy any book today, that would be the one. So we'll see. Let's see what else we have here. How are we doing today? You guys having a good time here on this Saturday afternoon? I don't know what to say. Oh, crazy times. It's just crazy times. It's happening, right? It is happening right now, this year and next, and it's all sort of begun because of this termination shock with the cleaner shipping fuels. But look at what's happening with the Antarctic temperatures right now. If you haven't been paying attention to Antarctica, I have to show you this because, I mean, this is just crazy what's going on. I'm going to go to the National Sea Ice Data Center, and if you don't know their website, you should really make a point to visit there. And what I'm going to do is just look at the Antarctic sea ice extent, and I'm going to go show all years. And here we go. This right here is 2023. We have record low Antarctic sea ice happening right now. And that was predicted for a long time. Look, one of these trolls this morning posted, you know, oh, you're a liar because there's a record high Antarctic sea ice extent. No, there's a record low Antarctic sea ice extent. And during the winter, you know, or this time of year, it's not such a big deal because there's not a lot of sun down there, right? But what it means is that when we get to next year, if this trend continues, we will have open ocean absorbing a lot of solar radiation, right? Creating a lot of heat in the southern hemisphere. Not to mention what it means for the native wildlife down there. I mean, it's sort of the big three: Antarctic sea ice, termination shock because of the IMO 2020, and El Nino. Those are the big three happening right now that you want to watch out for, you want to be paying attention to on a global scale. And yeah, we'll see what the summer brings for Siberia, whether there's record high temperatures there again or not. All right. Leon Simmons, yeah, Stan. Leon Simmons. Let me just get him up on Twitter so you can see who I'm talking about. So this is the person you should follow, Leon Simmons. I guess it's at Leon Simmons, SIMONS 8. Leon Simmons. Everyone should follow this person. A brilliant, brilliant man. And I so appreciate having him posting good information about the termination shock, the sulfur dioxide. All right, let's see what else we have. Who is denying the 2023 El Nino? It's not happening yet, by the way. So I just see Going South has said that people are denying the 2023 El Nino. It's not happened yet. It's a well over 90% chance. Regardless if the winds change direction, the sea surface temperatures are definitely going to head to El Nino level. And, you know, that'll pump heat into the atmosphere one way or another. But yeah, all signs point towards a record El Nino. Jack's channel, welcome. I haven't seen your name here before. What kind of time frame do I see for mass civil unrest taking place in different parts of the world? Yeah, what a question. Well, you know how I am with these sorts of questions. I like very specific questions. Depends on where you live. I don't see civil unrest happening in Russia very soon. It's dangerous there, or China, or India for that matter, because of poverty, or Somalia, because people are dying, or Australia. I mean, no. So when you talk about mass civil unrest, I tend to think of Europe and the United States as the locations for that kind of thing happening. When do I think it's going to happen in the United States? Yeah, I just have to stop that question. I just don't know. I don't know. I don't know. So Bernard Marx is apparently quoting a troller by saying, global warming, no, it's global cooling. Hothouse Earth, no way, we're going into new ice age. Climate change, no, it's climate control. Thank you, Bernard, for telling me all of the nightmares I have. Food shortages, and Jax, you must be late to arrive here. So yeah, as far as food shortages, again, all of these things are local. You know, what's going to happen with the rice harvest in Southeast Asia this year because of the record heat that's taking place, in Thailand and Vietnam and all those sorts of places, with droughts. China is looking at it like another year of record drought there. And you may remember the dried up rivers from last summer happening. So, I mean, food shortages are very localized. In this country, we're not going to run out of food anytime soon. We're just too wealthy of a country, and we steal, resources from too many places on the planet. We might, not have what we want. We already have shortages of crabs, for example. You're going to have a hard time getting crab because of the huge die-off that happened last year and may persist. They're talking about maybe 2 to 3 years before populations recover, which seems optimistic to me. So certain foods will already have a shortage of, but I mean, you can still go to a 7-Eleven and get a bag of Tostitos, I'm sure. That's not going to change anytime soon, even though if you were in Somalia, that you're eating insects if you can find them. Tennessee Jed said, Elliot, do you like Nate Higgins? Okay, true confession. I think that is a great question. Do I like Nate Higgins? I have never been able to watch a complete Nate Higgins episode. I understand that he is one of the most respected sort of climate, social change folks on YouTube. And he is very thoughtful and deep in the little snippets I've seen of him. So I would say he is definitely someone that if you're inclined to like that sort of thing, you would watch him. But yeah, I don't have anything at all to say negative about the guy. So I'll just leave it there. Let's see. So David Ulrich asks, speaking of Antarctica, how will the February ice melt next year when they hit their sort of low, affect the overturning circulation? So the AMOC is a northern hemisphere, right? So there is a similar overturning circulation in the southern hemisphere. And there's been all sorts of reports about that also being affected by this rapid temperature changes and ice. And I just don't know enough. I don't know enough. I'm sorry. Going South asks, has a buildup to an El Nino ever gotten as far as 2023 and then failed? I don't believe I've ever seen that. So one of the things to keep in mind with these predictions for El Nino is that there is a certain time of year when these predictions tend to be much less accurate than another time. So the span up through about the end of April, if you see an El Nino predicted, the problem is these winds, right, that I was talking about. And if that doesn't develop, then the El Nino is not happening. So you can predict it all you want in February or March, but if you don't get this change in the wind direction, you're not getting the El Nino. So a lot of people talk about this sort of this barrier, the spring barrier for predictions, beyond which they become much more accurate. So I believe maybe even in 2022, in February or something like that, people were saying maybe we'll have an El Nino later in 2022 because we had already had 2 years of La Nina. And that didn't materialize at all. And in fact, we had another year of La Nina. So the fact that not only has the progression gotten more severe over the months, but also the probabilities have gotten higher, right, is a great, gives me personally great confidence that yes, this year it'll happen. But always remember that until about May, until you start seeing predictions in May, you don't want to be shouting it too loudly. And I'm guilty of this, right? Because I actually started shouting it in February. And I got educated by a couple of top climate people out there who were saying, yes, the numbers are pretty strong right now, but don't go saying 100% El Nino, until we have better forecasts. Now, these winds are currently being predicted to change later this month. We're already at the end of May. So, I mean, once the winds change, all we have to do is wait for the Nino 3.4 zone to breach 0.5 for 3 consecutive months. Or if we're in the Australian group, it would be 0.8 for a single month, and they'll declare an El Nino. So, Australia might declare it June 1st, for all we know. So hang tight on that. Hopefully that answers your question a little bit. Mark Krein asks, first real clarion call event, a heat wave like in the Ministry for the Future or a Cat 6 hurricane or Blue Ocean event. Could happen this year or next. Definitely could. The wet bulb, so Ministry for the Future is another one of these books. I managed to get through about 100 pages of it before I gave up again. I couldn't remember the characters or anything about them. But it starts out with a very graphic picture of a heat wave in India, which, by the way, is probably where the first truly catastrophic wet bulb heat event will happen, either that or maybe somewhere in Southeast Asia or in a part of China. But that, we're talking about temperatures in the range of, 35 C with 100% humidity, which was just recently lowered, by the way, to 33 C with 100%, is fatal. That doesn't seem so far out of reach. Cat 6 hurricane, there are certain physical restraints, just geophysical restraints on how strong a storm can get. So Cat 6 hurricane, probably not. I mean, we don't even technically have that on the scale. But, it's sort of like saying a day in Death Valley you'll get to 140 degrees. The problem is a day is only so long. And there's certain, like the hotter it gets, the more radiative heating you get. You get this almost feedback where there's almost like a fixed limit to the physical possibility of this thing happening on the planet. So of those things, I would definitely say a massive deadly heat wave is in the offing. And I would not be surprised this year or next if we had a 20,000 death heat wave in Europe last year, right? We had the 2021 heat wave in the Pacific Northwest that got to 120 degrees in Lytton, 109, I don't know what it was. It was 49 point something Celsius, so 121 degrees. So yeah, these heat waves are very close. And I would not doubt at all that would be the first thing that happens. So Ministry is a greatly produced audiobook, highly recommended, many different voices and so on. Yeah, it doesn't matter whether it's audio or I can't remember characters. Is there a graph for wet bulb temperature versus humidity? Absolutely. Yeah. So yeah, 35 at 100%. Yeah. So there, if you go looking on Google, you can find a a graphic that will show you, the temperature versus the humidity, and then it will tell you, at a whole like temperature on one axis and humidity on the other axis, and it will tell you, life-threatening or dangerous or caution, and they have like different bands. And if you go looking, you'll find that particular image out there. Yeah, Angie Cordairo, I'm going to say it as Cordairo. Floods in Italy reported yesterday. Someone wrote that rising sea level, Italy was probably be underwater in 5 years. Yeah, I don't think so. Sea level rises really slowly. And, sea level rise forever has been like the iconic climate change, event. But it happens slowly. It happens really slowly. And we only see it when there are storms, right? When a storm comes through, the fact is all of that extra water on the whole planet, right? When you have a big front come through, it gathers water and pushes it in mass into a new location. And so, a few centimeters of sea level rise can mean an extra 2 or 3 feet of storm surge. So, and it's uneven all over the planet, but we're not going to have, in fact, there were pictures last year of Venice with the canals dry, right? There are so many weather influences that are local and regional, but we certainly will not have anything like parts of Italy underwater in 5 years. It's just much, much slower than that. We may see parts of Italy uninhabitable due to flooding or heat or drought or any combination of other things. Yeah, so going south says Lytton was 49.6 C. Zenape says I'm going to Venice in June just in case it's gone soon. Yeah, this is your bucket list chance to visit those places that you haven't visited yet. So how are we doing, everybody? I've been going for an hour and a half. You can probably hear it in my voice. Poppy Davis says, I'm loving this conversation. Will you do more, Elliot? It's hard for me. I love having these conversations. I love knowing who you people are and having these interactions with you. Because you feel really all alone, don't you? Knowing this stuff, and you have the people you sort of tweet or pay attention to online, and it's just very abstract. There are a few people out there who kind of let you into their lives, and I really appreciate them. I really appreciate Environmental Coffee House. I really appreciate Sandy, right? And I appreciate Sam Mitchell and his Collapse Chronicles. And I appreciate people who are just very real about what this is like for them to go through. And I also appreciate, those people who are taking steps to, I don't want to say mitigate because we can't, but to mitigate anxiety, to talk about how hard this really is for people, and are willing to have those conversations and make them available online. I am not a fan of pure doom for its own sake, just to get popularity, right? But that product sells, and so you will see a lot of people out there selling that product. And I always want to ask the question, like, let's go one step deeper than just pure doom, right? One step deeper than that, and talk about the impact on not just us personally, but on our experience of the planet, and how it's changing perception for us as individuals. I I just say that because of my own selfish, you know, way of going about my days, where I just notice things and am just feeling every bit of it every day. A Zoom chat would be fun. It might be if you think that. I don't know if everybody would want to see their faces. By the way, there are some people out there who hold Zoom sessions. Jem Bendel, I don't know whether he still has his group. Catherine Ingram, I believe, used to have a group. I'm not sure whether she still does. If you go looking, you can find a few Doomer sort of groups, Zoom groups, where people are just talking, about these issues amongst each other. All right. Mark says, do I feel like my data analysis provides an outlet for anxiety? 100%, 100%. I mean, for me, data analysis is relaxation, right? For you, reading a book is relaxation, right? For me, data analysis. I'm a mathematician. I'm retired now, but I find it remarkably easy to produce original work. It's not deep analysis, that other people have. It's just original. Right? Like, give me some data. Let me do it. Put it out there in some way people haven't seen before. And that does make me feel useful, and it does relieve my anxiety. Yeah, it's sort of been my MO my whole life. That is why I was an academic, because it's just, I wake up wanting to do things like that. I wake up, looking for data, looking for ways of understanding things in ways that I haven't before. Okay, we are going to get to an end soon, but I really appreciate these questions. Thank you all. Aerosol masking, there's a name. What's going to be some of the most urgent wrecking climbing impacts in the next 5 to 10 years? I have on my website, and I haven't brought this up yet, so let me just do this just for the thrill of it. I have this website called Climate Casino, and if you haven't seen it, I invite you there, and I haven't posted a new article to this in a long time. Maybe I'll post a link to this video just because it's there. But if you go to all posts here, and you click down way sort of at the bottom, and this is one of the very first things that got me noticed of all things on Twitter, was I asked for input from the Twitterverse, and people were very forthcoming. Here's my list of the top 40 impacts of climate change. So when you ask the question, what are going to be some of the most urgent impacts, what are some of the things that can happen from this list that could happen in the next 5 years or so? Algae blooms, wrecking large water sources, ash and smoke from fires, bees dying, absolutely. Climate refugees and migration, 100%. Coral bleaching, absolutely. Crop failures, absolutely. Deforestation and desertification are going to be slower. Disease and pandemics, absolutely. Droughts, absolutely. Drying up of lakes. I posted today on Twitter, my moment of doom today was about the drying up of lakes, right? So, there's also another article today about tsunamis being created by an Antarctic underwater landslide that could happen because the pressure differences are changing so rapidly in the ice sheet there. Financial collapse, absolutely. Fires, floods. Just go down this list. Easily half of these things could happen in the next 5 years. So yeah, when you say, what are the impacts in the next 5 to 10 years? This is the list. I would go down through this list. And at the bottom of the list, by the way, I have references to some of the more unexpected items on the list, just so you could see them. All right. Bernard Mark says that watching doomer content on YouTube is relaxation for you. It used to be for me too. I used to watch a lot of it. And I sort of felt like I had caught up. I was up to date. There was nothing new that they could really tell me that I hadn't already read myself, or couldn't read It's funny, I can read doomer content, but I can't read a novel. Oh, everybody. Yeah. Yeah, I'm gonna call it, guys. Yeah. So thank you all. Thank you all. Thank you all. Thank you all. And let's see how I usually do this. I forget. How do I usually do this? I think what I do is I click stop streaming right here. What happened to my camera? It has these weird colors on my face. I'll blame it on someone. All right, everybody, I will see you on Twitter for the next whatever period of time until I do this again. Thank you all for being here today. Thank you for joining me for this period of time on this day. And yeah.